All right.
So we start these things like we pretend like we don't know what we're doing, but we obviously know exactly what we're doing because we have another episode of Not an Accident podcast. And I am here, ladies and gentlemen. I am stoked for this one. Like I know I tell you I'm excited and we've been planning this one for a minute, but Chef Rios, Jacob Rios from Union, New America, Tampa. I pronounced that correctly, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I am so excited to have you, my friend. First of all, shout out to you. Always take amazing care of me and my family. So I want to start out by thanking you so much and welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So we're going to get right into it. How did you get into the culinary arts? Tell me about your background and let's dive right in.
I always had a passion for cooking. You know, that's something that I feel like when you cook, you get that connection to the person that you're cooking with or for. You know, ever since I was a young kid, you know, I always have these memories of my grandmother cooking in the countryside of Puerto Rico. Amazing cook, by the way. She has these recipes that I've been trying to mimic forever, and I can't yet.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So all my memories surrounding food are the ones that inspire me to this day. You know, when I left Puerto Rico, I wanted to be an engineer, mechanical engineer to be more precise.
Really? Okay. Holy cow. Yeah.
Yep. Moving here to the States, the plans changed a little bit. So I kind of, if I'm honest with you, you know, I went to be a lifeguard. I took a little break of pursuing that career. After that, my mom, you know, and we had a conversation like, Jacob, you have to do something more. I'm like, you know what? Well, that dream that I have for engineering kind of stay in the background, you know, and I always have this passion for cooking. So I'm going to pursue that. In the beginning, my dad, that was a shock to him because he's like, you know, hey, you had this goal of being an engineer. What happened? I'm like, well, I'm going to pursue this one, you know. And my mom, I still remember to this day, she went with me to culinary school. And she's like, if you're going to do something, you're going to do it 100%. You're going to go to school and build it up the correct and right way. So I went to the school and I was hooked from day one, man. When I saw those chefs there with the white chef coats, the tall hats, ever since then, I haven't looked back. You know, once I graduated from the Cordon Bleu up in Orlando, that's how I developed my career. I worked in the Disney World company for many, many years.
So you worked at Disney.
Yes,
What did talk to me about? Because we're big Disney fans. Politics aside, ladies, don't get me canceled quite yet. So tell me, what did you do at Disney? Tell me about that.
So I work in different hotels. I work in small restaurant, big restaurant. One of my favorite was when I worked at the Mexican Pavilion in Epcot.
Yep.
That was a super cool experience. You know, we pump out anywhere from 900 to 1,200 covers a day. Wow. I worked a little bit at Wolfgang Puck's when it was back in downtown Disney at that time. Now it's Disney Springs.
So you were down there a minute ago then.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I was. And that's where my building blocks, you know, for this culinary career. When COVID happened, you know, it's something that some people took that as an adversity. I took it as an opportunity. You know, the place that I was at, we shut down, you know, and we were closed for 3-4 weeks. And at that time, you know, if I can be honest, that's one of the toughest times in my career, you know. Sometimes we have to let people go, you know, due to their performance and stuff like that. It's not that it's easier, but it's justifiable. When I had to let go of my staff, that was one of the hardest things that I have to done in my career so far. But, you know, I was without working for about 3 weeks, you know, something like that. My wife and I, you're like, all right, well, what's next? We're not just going to stay here and just...
We're going to figure this out.
We're going to figure this out. You know, I always say with adversity comes a solution. After that solution comes greatness, you know. So I had this amazing opportunity in Charleston, South Carolina. We never been to Charleston, but I always talked about I want to learn.
I hear a lot of good things. Yeah. It's beautiful place.
Yeah. I always wanted to do this low country cuisine and learn more about Southern food. You know, in my previous career, I've done French, Mexican, Italian, Mediterranean. But I haven't done that. You know, my wife, she's my number one supporter. Without her, I couldn't be doing what I've done here. My parents helped me get to the starting point, and my wife, she's the one that has been carrying me, you know, and being there with me throughout the years. So she's like, we never been there. Let's go. Let's try this opportunity. And if I'm honest with you, Kevin, this opportunity when I moved to Charleston was not just only, you know, for my career wise, also helped me with my personal growth. I met amazing people throughout the years that I was in South Carolina. And it helped me turn into the person that I am now. Not just a chef, not just a cook in the kitchen type of deal, but also as a human being, as a leader. Those years that I was there, they were key in my career. And then just a little fast forward now I'm here in Tampa Bay. Amazing opportunity here with the people that I'm with at Next Level Brands. And yeah, that's how I landed in Union. That's a little bit of how I started, a little fast.
Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to break this down a little bit. One of the things I wanted to hit on a point, and I always try to hit on little kind of anecdotes and things like that. I love how you said that you kept going. And I hope the audience can relate to that as far as, we're all going to have trials and tribulations in our life. We're going to have things that are going to come up unexpected. And the only thing that you can do at the end of the day is keep moving forward. Of course. And I'm not trying to say, it's easy or anything like that. Yeah, it's, it's real easy for me to say that now, but you got to keep pressing forward. I do want to take a couple steps back with culinary school. Now, when you're getting training and you're going to school, is it like college where you're like picking a major almost? Like, okay, I want to specialize in Italian or I want to specialize in French. How does that kind of work? Yeah.
So back when I went to culinary school, you had two choices. You went the route of like the savory chef, which is basically your culinary 101s. It doesn't really specify just in French and Italian. It gives you a broad spectrum of all cooking per se. Or you go the route of the sweet side of things, the patisseries and baking and pastry program. So that's your first question for you, like what route to take. I took the route of the culinary savory side of things. And then, from there, you keep on going.
So you just keep moving forward. So you go to culinary school, and then was your first kind of, I guess, gig at Disney? Is that where you got hired on immediately?
Yes. So before Disney, I worked at a very small mom and pop restaurant. Okay. That was my real, taste of what this field is going to be. Very small restaurant, maybe 50 seats in that restaurant. Okay. I started washing dishes in that restaurant. From there, I started working in the fry station.
So you were ground up.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, sir. So I started washing dishes, making sandwiches on the side, paying attention to the next station, what the cook was doing. And that's how I kept on going while I was in school.
Now you move on to Disney. How do you think the high volume, because obviously quality is still very, very important, especially with a company like that. So how do you think the high volume affected your career to be able to just kind of pump out so many high quality meals at the end of the day, more or less?
Disney, it created a different challenge. When you're in Disney, of course, depending on the restaurant that you are at, my first one was a breakfast restaurant. When you say breakfast, that's kind of easy, just eggs. Let me tell you, that's one of the most challenging restaurants I've done. Because you're pumping out breakfast for 700 people, and doing
over 3 hours, 4 hours?
We open at 6:30, and then by 11:30, you feed all these people.
Yeah, 700 people in 5 hours. Yeah, it's insane.
Yes, sir. So, you're making omelets, you're making pancakes, all your regular stuff. But when you have that scale of people, you have to be organized. That's number one. You have to be there with purpose. You cannot be joking around or just walking around. You come in, you do your job, and you set up yourself for success while creating teamwork and, working with the people around you.
So you take this opportunity in Charleston, South Carolina. Tell me about, is that when you started becoming a leader, or were you taking on leadership roles at Disney as well? When did you start kind of developing into a leader, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
So those were my building blocks. When I worked at Levy Restaurants in the Disney company, that's a company that had 3 different restaurants. One of them was Fulton Scrap House. That was my first taste of what leadership and culinary is. Over there, I oversaw banquets, anywhere from 20 people all the way to 250 people, something very simple. And then your very intricate dinners. I was there with a program. Chef mentored me through it. It was about 3 months. And he saw that potential in me. And I told him, I want to be a sous chef. That's the first step, in your culinary career, to be a leader in this field. After that, I took this opportunity to work in Wolfgang Puck's. For there, those 2 restaurants were the building blocks of what a chef is. Yes, we were high volume restaurants. Yes, the intensity of those plates were insane. I can tell you that. But it taught me, to be a leader, you have to be very approachable. and you have to understand your staff and build camaraderie with your staff. They're there with you, It's not, you change that mentality of like, oh, they work for me, I can tell them what to do, whatever. No, not necessarily. They're there because they want to achieve greatness with you. So those were my building blocks to be a leader in the kitchen.
When you're hiring, and I'm going to butcher the terminology, so work with me a little bit here. I guess when you're hiring a cook, so somebody that's going to work for you, not maybe necessarily a sous chef, not somebody in a leadership role, but an actual kind of, cooking the food. What does a job interview look like? Like, it's like, hey, make me this meal. I mean, how does that process kind of go?
So of course, it depends who I'm going to hire. If I'm looking at a cook, I usually give them tests of like, hey, cook me this piece of salmon. Let's see how you cook, your flavors, your inspiration behind the dish. For me, that's very important. After that, I focus a lot on culture questions of who you are as a person. How do you handle stress? Honestly, how do you handle adversity in a kitchen in this very stressful environment? How do you ground yourself? When I'm interviewing a sous chef, which again, that's the first position before executive sous chef and executive chef, that position handles more when it comes to handling people per se. So yes, it's important for that person to be able to cook. But at that point, once you reach that sous chef, you should be a good cook. You should already understand flavors and techniques. So at that point, I focus more on how you are when you handle adversity, when you are stressed, how do you make decisions? How do you not let your emotions affect the decision that you are going to make? I focus a lot on asking questions about honesty, integrity, and respect. Those are my personal 3 core values. I apply that throughout everything that I do. So when I'm interviewing an individual that's going to be part of my team, those are the 3 questions, the first ones that I'm going to ask.
The biggest thing, and I've talked about it many times on the podcast, and I talk to my people about this at the end of the day, is culture, which I think is what you're kind of, relating to with your different attributes. And I'll even call them non-negotiables as far as when you're hiring. And I've said it once and I'll say it again. I think the culture, and especially what you're doing, you're working very closely together. Yep. You're in a high stress environment and you're working a lot of hours. I don't think there's, other than a hospital or maybe a law office, I don't think there's a lot of other jobs / companies where it requires a on-point cohesive culture. Definitely want the people to recognize that. Tell me about the journey. How did you go from Charleston now to Tampa?
Yeah. So Charleston, like I said, it was that stage in life that it was, I went from adversity of this pandemic. It eliminated all the years of hard work that I did throughout my Disney career. Charleston was that place that taught me that it's not just cooking, it's people working, right? So, I developed this relationship.
Yeah, tell me about that. Yeah.
With this great people, Brad Ball, Jude Wagner, back in my previous company, those guys, they challenged me a lot. I went there to open one restaurant, with them. I went in as an executive chef, to open a restaurant, a brand new concept. It ended up happening, that they saw my potential. They saw that, yes, I can open that restaurant, but I want more. I just didn't want to just keep on cooking and cooking and cooking. I want to build a future for my kids and my wife. So, my first interactions with them, they saw me. They're like, okay, well, you come from Disney. I know you have that background. What can you do here? So I started working with those guys, ended up working in all of their restaurants. It just so happened that, they needed help at their main location. I helped them out a little bit there. They needed help at the barbecue spot that we used to have. I helped them out with there. I was supposed to open this restaurant in July, but again, with the pandemic, everything got delayed. So here I am, almost November, and that restaurant hasn't opened yet. So I helped them run the other 3 restaurants. When that restaurant opened, fast forward, all those values and training that I did in Disney, those are the ones that we installed in this new kitchen. They were very impressed, and they said, you know what? We want to grow with you, this company. So we went from restaurant number 4 into opening restaurant number 5. All of a sudden, instead of just an executive chef, I became a director of culinary for this company.
Wow.
And I still remember to this day, Kevin, when I make that switch from executive chef to director of culinary, it wasn't just cooking now. Like, that was in the background now. Now it's more my mindset and how I'm going to lead. We had about 350 employees in this company, and all of a sudden, I'm sitting at this chair that I do get to make decisions that is going to impact 350 people in this company, and I remember always Brad would tell me like, Jacob, you need to keep learning. You need to keep growing. You need to be fit, wake up early in the morning, go to the gym, run, meditate, do whatever it is that you need to do to handle your stress. Jude always cited quotes from Extreme Ownership. That's one of my favorite books that I read so far. In there, of course, it gives you these scenarios like the guys in the middle of wars and training Navy SEALs, and again, in the kitchen, we're not at war. We're not training Navy SEALs, but
depends on the night.
Depends on the night. So, of course, those Friday nights.
Yeah. It depends who you ask.
Yeah. But how to apply those life-threatening situations to your daily life, and being there with them, it taught me to rethink, to analyze things better, and just to grow as a human being, man. So from Charleston, it was 3.5 years, like I said, that I was with them. And, my wife and I, for us, Florida has always been home. That's where we met. That's where we built our family.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to go back to Orlando. So we're like, we want to try something different. We live in St. Petersburg for about 1.5 years.
Sweet. Okay.
So we really like the area. And, I just started reaching out to people down here in Tampa, to be honest. I was lucky and fortunate that I found Next Level Brands, man. And my conversation with Heather Rivas and Joe Gugino and Jeff Gigante went extremely well. So I'm like, you know what? I do want to be part of that company. So we started the whole process of moving 2 states over. And then when I finally met the guys like that in person, because to this point, it was always like the Zoom interviews and
really? Okay. Yeah.
So when I first met them in person, I just make that connection, and it helped me solidify the decision of moving the family back to Tampa. So that's how we got to Union.
I want to, which is amazing, and I love Union. I go there too often. Well, I guess you can never say too often, but I love that spot. I want to go back to what you were saying about mindset, because that's so important. And I think that kind of, I haven't hit on it too much, and I wanted to go into it more in this episode. When you're going into business or going into your career, if you really want to be the best, and kind of what you're saying almost is there's additional steps outside of being the businessman or insert that career. And what I say by that is, like you said, the mindset, the working out, the eating healthy, the mental health, all of those different things. There's hours that you're going to have to put in, or time outside of your role, if you are going to exude really the true, I guess, best version of yourself, for lack of better terms. And I think people kind of touch on that, you need to work out, you need to do this, you need to do that, but they don't give the why. Yes. And I think that's a lot of the whys. If you want to be your best from air quote 9 to 5, which obviously we don't work 9 to 5, but 9 to 5, you got to be putting in the time from 5 to 9 or, 5 to 9. So
100%.
Tell me about, so you've had all this experience opening all of these different concepts. How does that process start? Like, because, does it, hey, we want to do, a barbecue spot, or we want to do, how does inception, come about?
I think that the first things that you got to ask yourself is like, what type of concept do I want to open? In what area? What is going to be the clients or the guests that is going to come by? And then from there, you say, you know what, this spot can be this concept. Once you have that homework done, like I call it, then it becomes a fun part, is designing the menu per se. Menu is the most important thing in the restaurant, because that's going to dictate your financials, how many people you're going to hire, how much you're going to charge for that plate, what type of guests you want in your building, and so on. Once you say, let's say, you know what, I want to open a barbecue concept, then you do your research and development. You eat your way around.
Yeah.
That's how I,
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So you just sample different, so do you go to other restaurants or look at different recipes and then just kind of figure out, hey, what's in this, or ask what's in this, and then how you want to develop into your own concept? Okay.
100%, man. When I'm designing a menu, let's say it's going to be a barbecue one, right? So when I was in Charleston, that we were changing our menus and doing all of that stuff, you do research by going to other restaurants. You talk with other chefs, you talk with other people in this industry, and like, hey, I'm interested in doing this. What's your take on that? You develop those relationships and friendships, and they will help you out that way. And then you do research. Research for me means, after work, I can be at the house 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. Just either I'm looking at documentaries on Netflix and the chef's tables and all of that good stuff, or I'm reading books about that specific dish. Or, honestly, I go out on YouTube and spend multiple hours just like, if I want to do a pulled pork sandwich. Or
but you're a chef. Yeah. The people that do that on multiple hours on YouTube, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say, for example, brisket per se, that's so essential in barbecue. I had the opportunity.
Oh, it's my favorite. Yeah.
Definitely. For me, Texas brisket is one of the best ones. I don't care what people say, right? Yeah. So I had the opportunity to go there, work with a bunch of chefs down in Texas, in Amarillo, actually, and just taste what that brisket barbecue should be like, And then once I have that, I do my research, I talk to people in the chef's community, then I create my own spin on it, my recipe, and I try to keep it as close as possible to the original. But I always give it a twist, my kind of twist, whether it's a different spice or a different procedure of how I'm marinating the meat or my approach to the dish per se. I don't just copy paste, For me, a recipe is a guideline. As a chef, you design your recipe, which is your guideline, so the cooks can follow the recipe. And that's how we design.
How do you decide when you want to change the menu? Mm-hmm. Because I know you guys do some seasonal items and things like that. So like how do you decide, okay, I guess you have your staples that you leave, and then how do you make those changes, or how do you decide that?
We're actually going through that process right now as we speak. So basically, for example, at Union, we try to keep our menu fresh, meaning, every year in the beginning of the year, we come in and say, you know what, these are our top 5 performers. These are our bottom 5 performers. These are guest favorite. These are not so favorite. These menus are seasonal or either a culinary trend that was back in 2024. Let's set up a new trend for 2025. At Union, we try to keep that as much as possible. So when people come to our restaurant, they're like, man, I never tasted that before. Or what is that? Or, I'm so intrigued by this 10 new dishes that are on the menu. I want to keep coming back and back and back. That's why we do menu changes. Some dishes we don't touch. Some dishes have become staples of the restaurant per se. But then some of them, they need a refresh. And that's okay with that, And for me, that's when the magic happens. You get all of your staff involved. That's, for me, is number one. I'm just one person, But when you involve the rest of the chef team, all the cooks, ownership has a lot of influence in that, and say like, you know what? This is going to be the goal for this year. We want to showcase X, Y, and Z. This is how we're going to do a menu change. And that's when the menu change happens, But we timeline it. That way it's not just, just a shot in the dark type of deal. Everything is pre-planned. Everything is premeditated type of deal. But that's our approach when we say it's time to change the menu. And that's how we do it.
What do you think is the hardest type of food or cuisine to, and I guess air quote, master or cook well? Like, what do you think the most challenging type of food there is to cook?
I would say, so for me personally, the one-on-one cuisine that you need to learn if you're really serious about this field is French cooking. French cooking, that's our building blocks for everything else. You have the chefs that build the brigade system in the kitchen, who a sous chef is and what an executive chef is and all of those terminology. But they also were the ones that designed, for example, our 5 mother sauces, and that for me is so essential for a cook to learn. The other ones, if I can be honest with you, and I'm learning those now too, will be a little bit more on the Mediterranean side of things, the Moroccan influence, the African influence.
A lot of spices.
It's a lot of spice, and over there, you get 10 different spices that you're putting in one dish. How can you make sure that all of those spices, they play along nicely with each other? That for me has been a challenge. This past year, I would say the past 6 months, I will call it, me and the guys in the restaurant, we have this quote unquote joke of ras hanout, that's a Moroccan spice blend that at first we're like, what is that? And then like, well, I used it before like this, and that. Let's use it for this, and that now, and everybody was intrigued by that. And now we designed 5, 6 dishes that has that type of spice blend.
Amazing.
But then how can you take those 5, 6 dishes and make them make sense that if you're sitting down, you can tolerate that spice level and enjoy your meal?
That's interesting that you said that. It's almost like is the area or are your customers even ready for that type of cuisine, because it may be just so, for lack of better terms, foreign, I guess, to them.
Yeah. That's honestly, Kevin, that was a challenge.
Yeah.
That's where we do our main menu changes in the beginning of the year, but then throughout the year, we do 4 different changes, the seasonal ones. So that's where we go ahead and take those type of risks of, let's use the spice blend. Let's see how the guests react to that and if they like it or not. I do remember in one of the menus, we put in a curry soup. Curry has those flavors that can be very pungent, very overwhelming. And then that was a challenge of how to tame those spices down and adhere to the masses, and to our surprise, that was one of our number 1 selling dish, to the point that now it made us say, you know what, now we do want to play with those spices and just go more and more and more. In this upcoming menu change that we're going to do, we are introducing those type of spices to our dishes. So.
Get ready, everybody. So get ready. You mentioned a couple different times, and we've kind of referenced it, a cook versus a sous chef versus an executive chef. Could you kind of talk about what those roles are or what that kind of means?
So in the kitchen, we have a brigade system, just like the armed forces does, your generals, your officers, and all of that. In the kitchen, you start as a dishwasher / prep cook. Those are your first steps. After that, you move up the ranks, meaning, cook 3, 2, and 1. Those are your skill levels, depending on the station that you're working on, whether it's grill station, saute station, fry station, it depends on your scale. From there, you become a chef de partie, which a chef de partie is in charge of multiple stations. In our kitchens per se, we have a chef de partie that is in charge of the pastry department, of the prep department, of the line department in the morning and at night. Once that individuals overcomes, and is successful handling 3-4 stations at a time, then it becomes a time to become a sous chef. Sous chef, what it means is I always call it the right hand of the chef per se. Those are your guys that are there with you, handling the orders, the inventories, expediting a service and making sure the kitchen is running smooth, As you move up, you get more responsibility. Then you have your executive sous chef, which is the second in command in the whole kitchen.
Okay.
I'm very blessed to have a great guy there with me.
Shout out. Yeah, that's the homie.
See Alfonso, man. He's been there since day 1 with me. And
awesome guy.
Awesome guy. But anyway, so basically, you move up to that executive sous chef position, and now your mindset opens, because all of a sudden you're not just directing cooks, you're directing sous chefs to handle cooks so that cooks can handle the food that you're putting out. So, and then you become the executive chef. Once you become the executive chef, it's like the general in the kitchen, handling everything from financials to hiring people, firing people, designing menus, and, it's a complete overview of the kitchen. So those are your different levels of what a kitchen operation is.
How is your relationship or the relationship with the educational piece with the wait staff? Because if obviously food has to come out hot in different ways and things like that, and then obviously they have to taste things, and you have to be able to explain what flavors are accentuating and things like that. So how does that educational piece or that flow go between you and the wait staff?
For me, back of the house, that's how we call the kitchen.
Okay. Back of the house, front of the house.
Yeah. Front of the house. So they both are together. One cannot exist without the other one. So, specifically at Union, we have made it a point that back of the house and front of the house work together. The general manager from there, Joe Dyer, I'm pretty sure you met the guy.
A couple times.
He is an amazing human being, and he's my partner in crime, like we always call it. It's like, he's in sync with the same goals that I have, and I'm in sync with the same goals that he has. So when it comes to training wait staff, he's the first one to say, Jacob, let's try this sauce with this wine or this drink. And from there, we go and train the rest of the wait staff. So if I'm saying, like, we're going to do a curry dish, he's already in his mind, he's really good at cooking as well. He will be like, okay, so the flavor profile of this sauce is this, and that. And that's how I'm going to approach the wait staff and teach them a different way. I'm really good teaching cooks. He's really good at teaching the wait staff.
Perfect.
So it's like
perfect marriage.
It's
there
great.
You go.
So that's how we go about training that. So, yeah.
How do you go about, I think we kind of touched on this, about continuing education as far as, and I think you kind of touched on it, just continuing to learn every day, watching videos, talking to other chefs. Are people, and I guess with that even more, I'm saying, are people willing to give you the secret sauce, I guess, for lack of better terms?
I would say yes, man. Like,
that's awesome.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the great mentors that I have throughout my career. There are many for me to mention. One of my best and close friends, his name is Vinoy Rogers. He was the one that taught me more on the fine dining side of things, a lot of molecular gastronomy. He was the one that was always like, Jacob, taste this spice, taste this sauce. Yes, your dish is good, but it could be better. Take it to this next level. When you surround yourself with people like that, it just prepares your career way, way, way faster than if you were to do it on your own. Now, when it comes to the research and you studying, that's on you. That's something that your work ethic is going to speak out. To get to the point that I have gotten so far, per se, and I'm very humble about it. It has been a lot of work, a lot of work that has been...
Yeah, if you're talking downtown Disney, you're what, 15 years?
Yeah.
10, 15 years? Yeah.
Yes, sir. So my thing is, it's like, yes, to be a chef is extremely hard. You're always surrounded in that stress environment. It could be 12, 14-hour days. And not every individual has the discipline of once you work 14 hours, then go back home and work another 2-3 hours researching this spice or researching this technique. So the next day that you're there, not only you learn it, but then now you got to teach it forward. So that for me is where the discipline comes in. And that's how you can become successful in this career. It's not just enough to show up and, all right, let me just do my job and cook and go on. That's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you want to achieve more, you got to have that discipline of either before or after work. You're studying, you're waking up early,
grinding.
You're reading, you're grinding straight up, man.
We have to talk about Chopped.
Yeah.
We have to talk about Chopped. So how did that journey start?
Of course.
So you apply, I imagine you applied for the show.
Yes, sir. So Chopped, that's, as much as I was always paying attention to the engineering stuff and like how planes are designed, cars are designed. I'm a huge car guy when it comes to that stuff. I was always watching cooking competitions. For me, that was something that, I can see the chefs running around. I'm like, man, I kind of want to do that one day, and I didn't know that possibility was going to happen. I was living in Puerto Rico. That doesn't happen over there. And when I'm in the States, I'm like, that interest kept on going. So anyway, fast forward to, I would say 2018, that was the first time that I was reached out from one of the casting agents from this show. I have my Instagram. I always try to be active on Instagram. I feel like that's your profile as a chef. So I actually,
real quick, I want to say, so I carry business cards on me, old school business cards. And, I know people like touch their phones to exchange information and stuff. I now tell people, I keep it as one of my screensavers. I would rather have somebody follow me on Instagram,
of course,
than give them a business card.
Oh yeah,
so
you better.
Yeah, correct. And they're going to see you consistently and stuff like that. So you were talking to a casting agent back in 18. It sounds
2018.
Okay,
yes, sir. So 2018, that was the first time that I was reached out. It didn't happen back then. It's a very long, extensive process, like 5-6 different interviews with different people, different producers.
Wow. So it's like super legit. I mean, I knew it would be legit, but
at first I thought it was like, all right, you just fill a couple paperwork and you're in.
That's what I figured. And then it's like one producer. Okay, it's an hour show. He seems cool or she seems cool. Okay, cool. And then so 5 or 6 producers.
Yeah, 5 or 6 producers. And after that, they do a whole background of who you are as a chef, who do you work with, for, and all of that stuff. It didn't happen that year, and I'm like, I was bummed about it. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, oh man, I kind of want that, but I kept on going. I didn't think twice, Back in 2019, the process started again. I'm like, you know what? Let me give it a second try. You never know what can happen. I don't just want to give up on it, So I apply again, and I did. I think this time was like 7 different interviews with 7 different people. Again, there, and to my surprise, I make it to the last stage. I'm almost about to, I get that call. I was super excited. Like, Jacob, you're in. This can be your episode. All of that good stuff. And then pandemic happened. Mm-hmm. So it kind of halted the whole process. I'm like, man. So fast forward, I go to South Carolina. My whole shop thing just went in the background. I didn't really pursue it anymore. I moved to Tampa, and again, a different producer reached out. Like, hey, have you heard about this program called Show? I'm like, yes, I have.
A couple times.
Couple times.
I've only met like 15 of your colleagues. So yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? And in my head, I'm like, I almost gave up.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, you know what? I already did that. It's very extensive. I don't think I want to go through that again. But then I'm like, you know what? Don't give up. So I kind of, this time I went in. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna do the same interviews, talk to different people. But to my surprise, man, this time I just felt this better energy about it and positive about it. And all of a sudden, I always remember, man, I was working and then all of a sudden I get a call. I'm like, whoa, what's this? So then the producer's like, hey, you're in. This is your episode.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
This is it. This is your time. You're going to come up to New York and we're going to do the filming there. So I'm like, awesome, man. So yeah, that's how I.
So did you have to, I guess they did enough of research and background and things like that. Did you have to cook a dish before you went on?
So the way that they do it is, of course, they see everything that you have done so far. They request pictures and videos, and like it's a very extensive,
what a process,
very extensive process, But then once you get to New York, then you cook for them, a specific dish that represents you. Something that is very unique to you or to your culture, or that's something that you want to say, you know what, this represents me. So that was the first one. So once I did that one, they do a bunch of other interviews to you. And then the next day, that's when you do your recording.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And then you took it down, man. You won.
Yeah, man. And that was the other side of things. It's like, I went in there. It was a very early day. You're in that studio for many, many hours.
Really? Okay.
And it's like they disconnect you from reality, they take your phones, they take everything away, and it's just, you just focusing on you and that competition. The first things is, that I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, here you are. You've been wanting this for 6-7 years now. And you finally here at the studio, please do not get eliminated on the first round.
Yeah. I got to go back to Tampa. Yeah, I feel so bad.
Oh, no.
Yeah. You're like, I didn't think I cooked this very well. I'm going to leave off an ingredient just so I can be like, oh, I forgot something.
Yeah.
And I ask this on every episode, when did you feel like you were successful?
So I would say, once I passed the first episode, the first round, the first test.
I'm just talking about in life, in your career.
Okay.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, switching gears a little bit. When did you feel successful? Like I'm doing something. I'm living my dream. You just had that change in you. When did that happen?
I would say it has been multiple stages in my career. When I first became a sous chef, I'm like, you know what? I became successful at this. I worked for it. I went to school for it. I'm finally successful at this. That was definitely one of the points that I said, I'm successful. Once I became an executive chef for the first time, that was another stage in my career. I'm like, you know what? I became successful. All these years I paid up to the fact that now I can handle the operations of an entire kitchen. When I became director of Culinary for a company, pumping out $25 million revenue a year and growing, 350 employees, I'm like, I became successful, very humble about it. But when you sit and look around you, I'm like, I became successful at that point, and then to my latest, victory with the whole shop thing. It's like I was able to look back, and I would say up to this point, that has been one of the biggest wins for me, and not just winning the competition and stuff like that.
7 years, man. I had no idea.
Years. Yeah. But to look back and, throughout that episode, they talk a lot and they asked me a lot of questions, and I kept me thinking of like, I was this kid in Puerto Rico wanting to do this. All of a sudden, I'm in the United States. I'm doing this for myself, for my family, for my wife that's back home supporting 100%. I felt like I was the top of the world, man, that day, And it's funny enough because I was in Brooklyn, sitting down, eating a piece of cheesecake in front of Junior's Cheesecake.
As you should.
Yeah. And I was just in awe, man. I'm like, you know what? All these years of working hard, busting my ass. Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're fine. We allow swearing.
And it's like that point for me, I was in awe, to be honest. And that's where I felt, you know what? It wasn't by accident, that I didn't go for engineering school, that now I'm doing this. My dad called and he's like, you know what? You're not an engineer, mechanical engineer you wanted to be. You're an engineer of food. You design plays. You go about it as an engineer would. So you are successful, Jacob. And for me, when he told me those words, man,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's everything. And I had recently a pro skateboarder buddy of mine, and I followed him when I was a kid and watched his career and stuff like that. And I thought I still think he's the coolest guy ever or whatever. We all have our childhood heroes. And I saw him recently at the Tampa contest, and he said, I've been following what you're doing, and I see what's up and stuff like that, and you're killing it. And it's like, and I say that similarly to say this, when we're so busy, and I think this happens to a lot of, great business people or people that are talented at what they do at their careers. We get so busy in the hustle and bustle that we forget to look around every once in a while. And we forget to be like, I can't believe I'm sitting at this table. You know what I mean? And it's like, I invite everybody, as they're going through, life, this journey, to take a little bit of time every once in a while and be like, look at this. Look at this. And, you have absolutely crushed it. And I love your story. We're going to be wrapping up. I want to say, what's next on the journey? What are you looking at next, or any new concepts, or can you reveal anything, or what's going on?
There's definitely stuff in the works.
Okay.
You guys will definitely see it coming soon, very, very soon.
Wonderful.
But, for now, definitely I see myself continue to grow with Next Level Brands, man. They have done extremely well with me, and, those guys, Jeff, Joe, Heather, the other Joes, and everybody that I've been working with so far, it makes me want to continue here and progress and open restaurants with them and just keep on growing my career, just like I did back in Charleston. Let's do it now in Tampa,
And I'll end with this last question. If there's somebody watching this that, is either starting their career in cooking or wants to start a career in cooking, what would be your advice for them?
Honestly, my advice is never give up, and I know that comes out a lot and people say that a lot, but when you really focus and you're disciplined about anything that you're going to do, and once you say, I do want to be a chef, guess what? The road is extremely difficult. So the first test that you're going to get is going to be like, even though it's difficult, I'm going to continue. I'm going to build this discipline of going home and study. I'm going to build this discipline of waking up early and meditate and work out, because I know that's going to help my stress throughout the day. Just hustle and bustle every single day, man, and do not give up.
It's getting 1% better every day. It's getting 1% better every day. Well, my producers, as always, will yell at me if I don't tell you to like and subscribe. This was an incredible episode. We've talked, quite a few times at the restaurant, but dude, you have an amazing story. Congratulations really on all your success. We always say, rather, it is no accident that Chef Rios is as successful as he is. So thank you, my friend. Thank you for coming on this episode. Yes, we will see you guys soon. Be good.